Did you know one of the original concept names for Burnout 3 was Burnout 3 See You in Hell? In fact, some people strongly believe that Burnout 3 Takedown was supposed to be a much more dark and grim experience. This is evident in pre-release clips that exist online that show just how eerie these high-octane vehicular crashes used to sound. This would be a stark contrast to the game we eventually got, the game we all know and love today. There's just something so beautifully simplistic about early 2000s video games. When you heard
EA Games
challenge everything, back in the day, you knew you were about to play a certified hood classic. I always considered Burnout the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater of racing games, if that makes sense. It's a little edgy, it's punk rock, it's against the system. It oozes the vibe of being a rebellious teenager like you and I. Oh wait, I'm a grown man. Come to think of it, that's kind of the reason why I'm revisiting this game. I miss my childhood games. I miss the beauty. I miss the pageantry. I miss Burnout 3 Takedown. After Burnout 2 Point of Impact, released in 2002, developers Criterion Games was at a crossroads. Their previous title had built a strong foundation of high-speed racing and thrilling crashes, but they hadn't yet achieved blockbuster success. The team was eager to push boundaries, but financial and creative hurdles loomed. Criterion's primary development engine, Renderware, was in high demand across the industry, used by many developers for its flexibility. This success gave Criterion the technical edge, but it also stretched the team thin as they juggled engine licensing alongside game development. Adding to this pressure, Criterion's earlier cancelled projects, including an unnamed FPS prototype, left morale strained, but they were determined to make Burnout 3 a breakthrough game. Initially, Criterion worked with Acclaim Entertainment to publish the first two Burnout titles. However, as Acclaim faltered financially and eventually went bankrupt in 2004, Criterion sought a stronger publishing partner. This led to a meeting with Electronic Arts, also known as EA, at E3 2003. EA, known for their blockbuster franchises, recognized the potential of Burnout. They proposed a collaboration to inject a more aggressive and cinematic flair into the series. Criterion accepted, but only under the condition that they would retain creative control, a rare stipulation when partnering with EA at the time. Despite this agreement, Criterion knew that EA's influence could creep into the process, and tensions around creative direction occasionally surfaced. One of the key shifts during Burnout 3's development was its aggressive, combat-focused racing mechanics. While the first two games emphasized clean racing with spectacular crashes as a consequence of failure, EA encouraged Criterion to embrace chaos and aggression as the core gameplay. This feedback led to the introduction of takedowns, a revolutionary mechanic where players were actively rewarded for slamming opponents into walls, traffic, or off cliffs. As development progressed, Criterion's small team of developers, fewer than 100 people at the time, worked tirelessly to implement these ideas. They revamped crash physics, honed the AI to make opponents more aggressive, and optimized the game for 60 frames per second. The new focus on player-driven chaos was paired with a cinematic presentation that embraced slow-motion effects, bright explosions, and intense feedback to create a visceral experience. In July 2004, Burnout 3 nearly complete, EA officially acquired Criterion and the Burnout IP. This was a double-edged sword. While the acquisition gave Criterion access to more resources and ensured global marketing support for Burnout 3, it also meant that they were now part of EA's corporate ecosystem. This would shape the future of Criterion and their games. But at the time, the team was laser focused on finishing what they considered their magnum opus. The path to Burnout 3 Takedown wasn't just about refining gameplay. It was also a journey of creative experimentation. Early prototypes of the game explored darker tones, experimental mechanics, and even more intense crash sequences. Let's break down the most intriguing aspects. At one point, the subtitle for Burnout 3 was seriously debated. While names like Crash and Burn and Seek and Destroy were floated, one particularly controversial option was Burnout 3 See You in Hell. This darker title hinted at a more intense, almost sinister atmosphere for the game. The See You in Hell concept reportedly aligned with early drafts of the game's tone, which leaned into gritty visuals, menacing UI elements, and a much more harsher auditory experience. The game's developers considered making crashes feel more horrifying, with eerie, jarring sound effects during the slow motion impact time moments. One idea involved a scary impact time noise, a distorted sound that would play during crashes to unsettle the player. This idea was ultimately scrapped, possibly due to concerns about alienating the game's broader audience. Ugh, that sounds kind of horrifying. Impact time, the slow motion feature introduced when a player crashes, was originally intended to be a much more interactive and chaotic experience. Early builds included ideas like full steering control of the wreckage, where players could quote-unquote drive their crashing car more precisely to chain additional collisions. This was scaled back to aftertouch, where steering was limited to gentle nudges. Also, real-time destruction meters, a prototype mechanic displayed live updates of the damage caused during a crash, with more detailed metrics like cost of property damage or virtual lawsuits filed against the player. This was deemed too complex for the final game. Even the crash mode had a grittier origin. Early prototypes featured pedestrian models, though they were never actually harmed. This was scrapped to avoid controversy, and it also featured dynamic weather and time of day. Some crash junctions were supposed to feature rainy conditions or nighttime settings to create more dramatic visuals. These were cut due to time constraints. Criterion even reportedly played with the idea of Easter eggs that referenced the series' darker development phases. For instance, some fans believe that the "See You in Hell" tagline inspired the more menacing color palette of the menus and the aggressive in-game announcer DJ Stryker, whose over-the-top commentary occasionally veered into dark humor.
Here's something I know. There's always a lot of tourists up at the Temple Complex. I think it's just about time the Burnout circuit gave them some real sights to see. Set shutter speed to super fast coming through. For all the racing info, keep it on Crash FM. And we are back on Crash FM. I'm very excited because I just had a few of those things that make you go, whoa, okay, looking out over the glisten.
As Burnout 3 neared completion, EA pushed for a marketing campaign that emphasized adrenaline, aggression, and fun. The darker ideas were mostly stripped back, replaced with an exciting rock-fueled aesthetic powered by EA tracks. The game's slogan shifted to emphasize takedowns as a core mechanic, appealing to a broader, younger audience. Criterion refined the game further in response to focus testing. For example, the scarier impact time noise was replaced with the now iconic metallic crash sound and the shattering glass effects. The menus then became sleeker, shedding the grittier design elements in favor of a polished, adrenaline-pumping aesthetic, and in the end, Burnout 3 Takedown struck a perfect balance. It retained enough of its intense crash-focused DNA, while shedding the darker, more experimental ideas that might have alienated players. Fans have since speculated about what a grittier Burnout 3 might have looked like, but as it stands, the game became a legendary entry in racing game history. The progression and campaign of Burnout 3 are masterfully designed to pull players into an endless cycle of chaos, rewards, and excitement. From the very first event, the game establishes a rhythm of constant gratification, ensuring that every moment feels meaningful and every effort is met with tangible rewards. This approach doesn't just keep players engaged, it makes them feel addicted. You know, as I was playing this game, I was always chasing the next unlock, milestone, or moment of destruction. Criterion Games understood the psychology of reward system and implemented a progression loop that perfectly complements the game's high-energy, aggressive nature. One of the most compelling aspects of the game's progression is how frequently it rewards players. After nearly every event, players are treated to a new unlock, whether it's a sleek new car, a new track to race on, or a unique gameplay milestone that adds to our sense of accomplishment. The rewards don't stop there. Pulling off signature takedowns, for example, earns players bragging rights, as their most spectacular crashes are immortalized in-game. Similarly, wreaking enough havoc during a crash event generates news headlines, making your carnage feel globally impactful. These moments of recognition are not only deeply satisfying, but also encourage players to experiment with new ways to dominate the competition. It's a clever design choice that ensures gameplay never becomes repetitive, as every action feels like it's building towards something greater. And you are seeing those gold stars go up every single event when you're tracking your stats. What sets the progression system apart is its ability to make every moment feel important. Whether you're just a few takedowns away from unlocking a new car, or a few dollars shy of causing record-breaking crash damage, the game constantly teases you with rewards that feel tantalizingly close. This creates a gameplay loop that's nearly impossible to walk away from. I kept telling myself, okay, just one more race. The pacing is deliberate and addictive. Just as you achieve one milestone, the game dangles another one in front of you, urging you to keep going. This key dangling effect, where achieving one goal reveals 5 more, is a stroke of genius. It's like dangling a set of keys in front of a toddler's face. You know we're gonna reach up and grab it, and we're gonna want more and more and more. It keeps players in a perpetual state of pursuit, always reaching for the next reward. The result is a sense of beautiful chaos that perfectly aligns with the game's high-octane nature. The Burnout World Tour campaign guides players through a structured journey of escalating speed, destruction, and challenge. Vehicles are divided into 6 distinct classes, or series as the game calls them, which players unlock gradually as they progress. The Compact series serves as the starting point, offering nimble, entry-level vehicles ideal for learning the aggressive driving style that defines Burnout. As players advance, they gain access to the Muscle series, where heavier, more powerful cars introduce a greater focus on impactful takedowns. The progression continues through the Coupe series and the Sports series, where speed and precision become increasingly critical. By the time the players reach the Super series, they're piloting lightning-fast machines that demand both mastery and nerves of steel, because you are gonna crash, I'm telling you right now. There's also the Special class of vehicles that features the classic Burnout 2 vehicle, and also some Formula 1 cars that are just god-awful at handling. And finally, we have the Heavyweight series, which is exclusive to the Crash mode, and they're basically here to maximize pure destruction. This gradual progression ensures that the gameplay evolves naturally, offering new challenges and opportunities without overwhelming the player at the same time. The campaign structure brilliantly mirrors the chaos and excitement of the gameplay. Each new car series feels like a step forward, not just in terms of speed or power, but also in how it changes the way the players interact with the world. Compact cars encourage tight, aggressive racing, while supercars require finesse to control their blistering speeds without losing control and crashing. The heavier vehicles in the Special series, on the other hand, completely flip the gameplay dynamic, focusing on sheer destruction rather than speed, because these bad boys are slow and heavy. This variety ensures that players are always engaged, with no 2 stages of the campaign feeling the same. It's a testament to Criterion's ability to balance progression with variety, ensuring that players feel a sense of growth while keeping the experience fresh and exciting. That is, however, if you don't make the same mistake I made when I played the game and finish the World Grand Prix right when it's available, which means the final hours of the game after I completed the World Grand Prix are so extremely boring and tedious. I was left with over 60 crash events that I would just have to do over and over and over and over. And while yes, crash events are fun, they lose their novelty after doing 60 of them in a row. I promise you that. I still have nightmares about the green ×4 multiplier in my head. At least at the end of completing the Crash Tour, you unlock the Burnout 2 car, which was cool. You know, there comes a point where you play so many crash events, it's not even about creating destruction anymore, but rather just actively seeking out where the ×4 multiplier is, aiming for that right away, and then seeing what happens after that. But at that point, I was so close to getting gold on all events, I decided, what the hell, why not do the remaining 30 something races and 100% all the events in the game? And so I did exactly that. And the credits rolled. And that was Burnout 3 Takedown 20 years later. I will say, in terms of gameplay, the handling can feel very wonky at times. It's only until you've completed a bunch of races do you start to get the hang of it. But when you do, boy does it ever feel good to nail a perfect drift around a corner into a boost. There's nothing quite like the feeling of nailing a crazy slide in this game. Taking a corner at just the right angle, sliding through smoothly, and launching into a burst of acceleration is one of the most rewarding parts of the experience. But for every moment like that, there's an equally brutal one waiting around the corner. You might think you're driving the perfect line, only to crash into oncoming traffic that shows up at the worst possible time. These crashes can completely throw your race, and while they are frustrating, yes, they're also a reminder of what makes Burnout 3 so unique. The traffic isn't just there to add realism, it's part of the challenge. Without it, the game wouldn't have any of those unforgettable crash moments that have become its trademark. Speaking of which, the traffic in this game is brutal, so unforgiving. You will crash very often. This seems like it always comes at the worst possible time too, with a chance of the collision throwing your entire race. Well, I guess that's the whole point of the game though. Without the challenge of traffic coming from all angles, you wouldn't have epic crash moments, and that's Burnout 3's bread and butter. That's the beauty of the game. The unpredictability of the traffic is what keeps you on your toes. It forces you to stay sharp, constantly aware of your surroundings. And while those crashes can be devastating in the moment, they're also what lead to some of the game's most exciting moments, turning failure into spectacle. It's a balancing act between frustration and fun, and it's one of the reasons the game is so memorable. Speaking of memorable, the reason why Burnout 3 is loved by fans alike, why it's so recognizable as one of the best games of all time, not just racing games in particular, but games as a whole, is because of how mainstream Burnout 3 became. It was a game that even non-gearheads or car people, whatever you want to call them, still enjoyed it. It transcended that. It was for the casual racer. That's why it broke into the mainstream market. It's a game that is so easy to pick up and play, and for the most part, that's what casual gamers want, even to this day. It's honestly a very simple premise too. There's really not much race variety when you think about it. There's your standard race, which is pretty self-explanatory. The person in first at the end wins. There's the crash events, of course, where the objective is to cause as much property damage and carnage as possible. There's the burning lap, which is a time trial race against the clock, the most infuriating race of this entire game in my opinion. It wouldn't necessarily be that hard if it wasn't for the increase in traffic spawns while you attempt these. I guess in a way that's what gives this mode its charm, but it's quite rage-inducing. You will crash over and over and over and over. There's the eliminator races that are 5 laps long. With each lap that passes, the competitor in last place gets eliminated from the race. And there's also the face-off, which is a 1v1. If you win the opponent's car. By far the hardest game mode in this game, solely based off the atrocious rubber banding. You will not have anywhere close to a big lead in any of these races, I promise you. The second you take your opponent out and think you're gonna pull ahead, that rubber banding will come up and surprise you like never before. And last but certainly not least, we have road rage. A lot of fans enjoy crash mode the most, but for me, road rage is where Burnout 3 shines. I absolutely adore this game mode. The objective is to complete as many takedowns in a certain amount of time or before your car gets totaled. I was constantly trying to outdo my last run, going for personal records to see how many I could hit in a single run. I think my record is around 32 takedowns, which I thought was good at first until I searched up other people's records. Oh goodness. The dynamic pairing of the high octane road rage event with Burnout 3's soundtrack is a match made in heaven. I wish I could go deeper into this game's soundtrack as it's one of my favorite of all time, but I'll allow you to visualize what happened to me. Shortly after I started to get a grip on Burnout 3's kind of wonky handling at first, when I thought, okay, I got it now. I was doing a road rage event, eliminating opponents as my heart desired, when suddenly something happened, something magical. So like I said, the premise of this game is very simple, and you'd expect with that little amount of race variety that the game would get stale, especially with its whopping 173 events, but it actually doesn't. I enjoyed it thoroughly all the way through. Well, besides the whole 50 crash events in a row thing, but hey, it happens.
The beaches, the bazaars, the sights, and the smells.
Hey, Stryker, go away.
Stryker here. How can you play a game for 1,000 hours and still suck this hard?
Dude.
If I had $1 for every time you crashed, I'd be able to quit this fucking job.
Dude, stop. You get so annoying.
Hey, it's me, Stryker, on Crash FM. Just wanted to let you know that my grandmother's better at this game than you, and she's been dead for 16 years.
What I like to do when I play games is jot notes down as I go through them that honestly and brutally depict some very random and mostly unimportant pros and cons of whichever game I'm playing, but it's tradition. So let's start with the cons of Burnout 3. The limited camera control during impact time. Players cannot adjust the camera during impact time. This limitation can be frustrating as it restricts your ability to strategically steer your wreckage towards opponents for aftertouch takedowns. The fixed camera angle may hinder your spatial awareness, making it challenging to execute precise post-crash maneuvers. Unpredictable respawns. There are instances where, after taking down an opponent, the game respawns your vehicle directly in the path of oncoming traffic. This sudden placement leaves little to no reaction time, often resulting in immediate, unavoidable collisions. Such occurrences can disrupt the flow of gameplay and may cause frustration during critical race moments. Minimal car customization. This game only allows players to select the color of the vehicle from a very restricted palette. The lack of personalization contrasts with other racing games of that era that provided extensive customization features, potentially diminishing player engagement for those who enjoy tailoring vehicles to their preferences. Now, it didn't have to be Underground 2 levels of customization or Midnight Club 3, but maybe a couple extra paint jobs, maybe a different rim or two. It would have helped. Frequent and lengthy menu navigation. The game requires players to spend considerable time navigating through the menus between events. This frequent interruption can detract from the overall pacing, as many players find the constant transitions disruptive to the immersive high-speed racing experience. For example, when you unlock a car, there's a couple seconds where you can't skip the unlock animation, and when you're unlocking multiple cars in a row, this can get pretty tedious. Repetitiveness and crash mode. While initially entertaining, crash mode in Burnout 3 can become repetitive, especially in the later stages of the game. The objectives and scenarios may start to feel monotonous, potentially reducing the mode's replay value over time. Incremental differences in unlockable cars. Many unlockable cars in this game are only marginally different from previously acquired vehicles, often featuring slight variations in stats or aesthetics. This incremental progression might lessen the sense of achievement for players seeking distinct and diverse cars. Well, now that that's out of the way, let's get into the pros. Authentic early 2000s cultural references. Burnout 3 captures the zeitgeist of the early 2000s, exemplified by in-game lines from DJ Stryker himself.
Crash FM back again, and you guys, these European chicks are so hot. I hear they love being romance. How about a nice quiet drive in the country? Forget that. Bring on the Burnout action, and if she doesn't like it, she ain't your type. For all your highway listening, stay with Crash FM.
These phrases evoke such a sense of nostalgia and reflect on the era's pop culture, enhancing this game's immersive experience. God, what I would do to go back to this era. Perceived variety in vehicle selection. Despite the aforementioned similarities among cars, the game succeeds in creating a perception of variety through distinct handling characteristics and performance attributes. This diversity encourages players to experiment with different vehicles to find one that aligns with their racing style. Just stay away from those Formula 1 cars. stars. Inclusion of Need for Speed Underground 2 demo. Accessible through the extras menu, Burnout 3 offers a playable demo of Need for Speed Underground 2. This feature provides additional value, allowing players to sample another popular racing title from the same publisher without even leaving the game. I really miss the era of games including demos of other games within the game. Gameception. In-game advertisements for contemporary EA titles. Burnout 3 features in-game advertisements for other EA games from the same period, including titles like Tiger Woods PGA Tour and Need for Speed Underground 2. These promotions not only serve as nostalgic references, but also provide insight into EA's marketing strategies during the early 2000s. Exceptional year for in-game soundtracks. The year 2004 was remarkable for in-game soundtracks, with Burnout 3, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, Need for Speed Underground 2, and Def Jam Fight for New York, all featuring memorable music selections. Man, 2004 was a wild year for games. So much quality. As of 2025, comprehensive sales numbers are not readily available for Burnout 3, but we do know that the game sold over 2.3 million copies before the year of 2006 in the United States alone, making it a smashing hit of a game. Even if you take a time machine and look back at old reviews, you'll be able to see that this game was held in high regard even in 2004. Now, 20 years later, people are still drawn to it, dissecting it, analyzing it, and going through every detail of this game. I wouldn't even say that this game was competing with any other arcade racers at the time as well, as it was low-key kind of in its own genre. No other game meshed the vehicular battles with races like this game did. I believe this is why the game is widely considered a classic. With that being said, Burnout 3 holds near and dear to my heart because it represents an era of gaming that was not only revolutionary in the games that were being put out, but because of the fact that the games of this era were made out of love and passion for the art. No microtransactions, no battle passes, no gimmicks. That's why I hold so many games of this era close to my heart. It's not just blind nostalgia. There's a reason why so many people feel similar in this regard. Burnout 3 is the peak of the Burnout franchise in my opinion, laying the foundation for the future games to come after it. When I think of Burnout as a whole, taking everything into consideration, I get happy knowing that I got to experience peak in its prime, but I also get sad because the franchise has now been dormant for about 17 years now, which is crazy when you put it into perspective. Barack Obama was the president the last time a Burnout game came out. GTA 4 was the newest Grand Theft Auto game when the last Burnout game came out. If this series, in particular Burnout 3, is widely considered one of the most classic games of all time, then why has the franchise gone dormant? I guess that's a question to be asked another time when I dive into Burnout 3's successors. I've played a little bit of Burnout Revenge back in the day, and I've never played Burnout Paradise, so it should be interesting to see how it goes. I also found my PSP randomly recently and found these two games, so maybe we'll take a little glance at these two bad boys as well. And when you really think about it, a game having legendary sequels only solidifies the original game even more so as a classic. If Burnout 3 laid the foundations of things like takedowns, punchy sound effects, various cars, various race types, and high-octane action, I can definitely look forward to the next games afterwards, especially when you compare Burnout 3 to the first two games in the series. Both 1 and 2 were also great for the time, but the leap forward in every possible aspect for 3 was and still is remarkable. Which brings me to my last point. This game's graphics are beautiful. I was kind of shocked as I was playing through the game. Going through the 3 settings you play in, USA, Europe, and Far East, all offer something unique in terms of gameplay, lighting, and even a little bit of weather, like for example the snowy races. Little details like driving on the left side of the road in the Far East add further levels of immersion too. Just take this clip for example. The sun shining, ripping through the streets of the game, while a nice little sun glare hits your eye ever so slightly. It's beautiful. You could argue that it looks better than it actually looked back in the day because I'm using an emulator, but even if you look at original footage, the game looks sexy. If you ask me if I recommend this game in big 2025, I'd say absolutely yes. It's considered abandonware, so it would be free to download off the interwebs. Throw this bad boy down in an emulator and boom, you'll have a great time. I don't want to keep going on and on and on, but I just had to let this all out to express my love I have for this game. Not only for me, but for those people who feel the same way but haven't yet expressed it publicly. This is for you, Burnout fans. We know you're still around. Stay passionate about the Burnout games because you never know, we might just get a new installment one of these days. As we reach the end of our journey with Burnout Burnout 3, it feels like we're saying goodbye to an old friend, one who left an indelible mark on the culture of gaming. This game wasn't just another notch on the leaderboard, it was a vibrant, pulsating force that reshaped what we knew about arcade racing. Burnout 3 didn't just stretch the boundaries, it obliterated them. It introduced a level of intensity and strategy with its takedown mechanic, turning every race into a dramatic showdown where each crash was both a strategy and an act of sheer spectacle. Here, speed wasn't just about going fast, it was about controlling the chaos, making every race a narrative of daring, destruction, and triumph. This game's cultural footprint was vast. Burnout 3 became the anthem of our gatherings, the legend of our gaming nights, where each session was not just play, but an event. It was a shared experience, a piece of gaming lore where every player could recount their epic takedowns or narrow victories, forging bonds over the shared thrill of speed. But as we reminisce, we're reminded at the stark contrast of today's gaming world. The industry has moved towards models where engagement is measured by time spent rather than fun had, where games are structured more like businesses than playgrounds. This evolution has left many longing for the days where games like Burnout 3 were made for the sheer love of the craft, where the thrill of the race was the only reward needed. Burnout 3 Takedown remains a testament to an era when games were crafted with heart, not just for profit. It was singular in its approach, not only for its mechanics or its vivid graphics, but for its ethos. This game teaches you that destruction is beautiful. It's so beautiful. Let's ponder what made Burnout 3 so unforgettable. It wasn't just races, it was the sensation of living every moment, every swerve, every collision. It reminds us that at our best, video games are not just a pastime, but a profound expression of human joy and ingenuity. They evoke a sense of wonder, a vision of what could be if we prioritize the art over the commerce. In this era where the essence of gaming feels increasingly at risk, Burnout 3 stands as a beacon of what was, and perhaps what could be again, even though I highly doubt it. Here's to hoping that one day, another game will ignite our souls with the same intensity, reminding us that in the heart of gaming, the road to glory is paved with passion, not pennies. And in that moment, we'll remember the true legacy of Burnout 3 isn't the crashes, but in the echoes of laughter and the thrill of the chase, forever etched in the heart of gamers.